Okay, everyone. Well, it's great to see you all, and thanks so much for coming. We've got a very good meeting for you today with lots of interesting information, and I hope that we will have a really good discussion. So here is the agenda. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about the resources working group, the two new working groups that have formed, the blog, and then I'd like to spend the bulk of our time talking about a framework for training practitioners. I'm hoping we'll take at least 30 minutes, if not longer, to look at it, talk about it, and get some feedback from you. I know it'll only be your first shot at looking at it because it's really brand new. And then there's just a few updates at the end. So just a welcome to anyone who's new, who's not been here before. We're glad you're here, and we hope that you'll keep coming and tell others about us. And then thanks, of course, to all of you who are coming back to be with us again. So I'm going to now turn it over to Zahira, and she's going to talk about the resources group and the kinds of revisions and enhancements that they are doing and are planning for the resources repository on the website. So Zahira, go right ahead. Let me know when you want me to change slides.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. And you can move on to the next slide.
Okay.
All right, so in the resources group, we are trying to understand how our community is using the resources that we have to be able to make its contents more relevant and more accessible to them. So for those of you who are new, the Commission currently has two types of resources or materials. We have what we call, we have original content on our website, what we call Commission's materials. And that's content that the Commission has created. And then we also have on the website career-related materials. And those are resources that have been submitted by our members. And those usually come in the form of links to those resources or PDFs. Well, so a couple of issues that we are currently working on is, well, they came from a question that we asked Matt, because we weren't sure how much attention the resources were getting. And after checking with Matt Arts, the traffic stats for the website, we realized that we were not getting the kind of attention that we were hoping for the resources. And so one thing we tried, and this was Matt's idea, was changing the navigation menu on the website, and that increased the views of the resources by 110%, which is a step in the right direction. But we still want to learn more about how our users are using that information and what their needs and motivations are to be able to provide them with the right resources. Now, about those issues that we have, one of them is that we use a platform called Notion to host and catalog the resources submitted by our members. And from there, we upload them to our website. So everything is synchronized and it's easier for us to manage. But some of the resources are PDFs, and those are not transferring from Notion to our website, although they are listed on the resources page as a citation. So when users try to open those PDFs, they find that it's empty. So that's something that we are aware of and that we are trying to fix. And those resources made up about 20% of our repositories. So please be a little patient with us because we're trying to fix that issue. The other issue that we're having is that right now, in order to access the resources submitted by our members, visitors have to be logged in. And we understand that it's an extra step, and we would like to remove this obstacle. We were told that we needed to have that login for copyright, for reasons related to copyright laws. And Elizabeth has been talking to a copyright lawyer, And it looks like we may be able to remove the logging barrier. So that's good. And now more good news. In the last meeting, we talked about the resource of the month, and that's a new initiative that we are going to be implementing pretty soon. We are ready, so it's going to happen soon. And the idea is to choose one resource from the Commission's original content and promote it in our platforms, in our newsletter, in our blog, and on our LinkedIn page. That way we can showcase the work of the Commission in bite-sized pieces for our members and hopefully get some attention from non-members too. So if you haven't joined our LinkedIn group, please go ahead, because that will be an easy way for you to see what we put out. And if you find useful the resources that we're sharing, please share it with your network. Thank you.
Thanks, Zahira. Anyone have any questions for Zahira? Okay, we'll move on. Next up, we're going to be talking about the 2 new working groups. Tracy?
Okay, let me unmute myself here. Okay, well, we just started. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yep.
We just started and just met last week, coming together for working on lesson plans and developing new tools to use with those lesson plans. So what we are trying to do in our group is basically to create these new tools, along with we already have some really wonderful tools available, but we want to make more of those wonderful one-page tools that we can use regarding lesson plans that we can pass along to educators so that they can they can use these lesson plans in their classrooms, in their workshops, wherever they are teaching anthropology, so they can incorporate this and also reach out to their students and teach their students about being able to get a career and get a job in with a degree in anthropology, or just with experience in anthropology. So Elizabeth, Kaylee, and I met via Zoom to discuss possible lesson plan ideas. We're in the lesson plan group. There's another group that works on the tools. And so we are developing those lesson plans that work with the CRC tools, at least one of those tools per lesson plan. You can have, we'll probably have one or more that instructors can use. The lessons can incorporate more resources. You don't have to just limit yourself to what we create, but we want to be able to provide tools specific to finding careers, finding jobs in anthropology, to make that instruction straightforward and simple for instructors. So we have that kind of providing those resources with the lesson plans to make that instruction a little bit easier. Currently in production, we have 2 types or 2 lessons. One is a take the quiz tool that comes along with a lesson plan. That is actually something that is currently being tested with community college students. Elizabeth has a friend, Freddie Rodriguez, is that right, Elizabeth?
Yep.
Who is currently testing that. And so once we start getting back some results on that, then we can tweak it. We can see how we want to work that lesson plan, if there's anything that needs to be done with that or with the tool itself. We also talked about developing something called Anthro Bingo. That is also a tool and a lesson plan. And that is currently in development. And that's something that, all these, we had lots of kind of ideas and kind of directions we can go, but if we had more people with us, I think we could really turn out some wonderful wonderful tools and wonderful lesson plans to use those tools in order to be able to kind of get this out and get this distributed to educators and get this going. So if you are interested in working in the lesson plans working group or in the tools group, please, if you could just include your name in the chat pod and just let us know. And we would love to have you. And so that we can, produce more of these, have more ideas, and also get more perspectives on, whether, the ideas that we do have would work, or, just any experience or any help would be greatly appreciated.
Great, thank you, Tracy.
Sure.
Okay, next up, Priscilla.
Hi, I'm really pleased to say that we've got blogs through till mid-November, November 16th, and we have an additional one that's almost finished, so that'll take us almost to the end of November, and we have several in the works. So it looks like we're pretty good till the end of the year. But what we really are hoping to get are more blogs from students. We have, I've been pushing this. I did contact one really dynamic student from Cornell, and I'm hoping I'll get a chance to see her this week. I'm going to be up in the Finger Lakes, and I'm hoping I can get in touch with her again and see how she's doing. Extremely dynamic, very, very interesting woman, and very interested in writing a blog because of her experience with her fellow students and people who have been concerned about getting work. So I'm hoping we can get her to participate. So if any of you have access to students, please see if they would be interested in talking about what it means to follow a career in anthropology, what they hope for, what would be helpful to them, what they have seen other people do, and whether they'd like to emulate that. I mean, there's lots of possibilities for students to pursue. I did get interesting pushback from when I met with the WAPA program, I got some interesting pushback from one of the participants who basically said, well, students don't have anything to say. And I just about fell off my chair. So I hope we can, disprove that, so to speak, and make sure that we get, some really good material from students. I wrote a piece for Napa asking for blogs, and they said they would, keep it current, keep it going. I haven't heard anything back from it, but at least it's out there in the literature, so to speak. And I have a calendar of blogs. So as I said, going through till the 2nd, through the 16th of November, and hopefully on further. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'll say that I'm going to thank everyone here who has participated, who's written a blog. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. And if any of you have I would say probably no more than an hour to write a blog, it's really almost like writing a letter, something personal and observational that you would like to share. We would love to get what you have to share with us and talk about. We've had so many different aspects of the anthropology career, everything from a sort of academic career to the coaching, personal career, to sort of, basic instructions like writing resumes. So there's a lot of ground covered. So, feel free to think that you would have something to contribute. I'm sure all of you would have a story to tell in a blog. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, just think about blogs, get those people writing blogs, and, we can move forward.
Great, thank you so much. And now we come to the big topic, which Ryle is going to talk about. He and I have been thinking about training in practice or training for practitioners for many years, well over a decade. And Ryle finally put something together that I reacted to, and he's now going to share it.
Yeah, thank you. Go to the next one, Elizabeth, if you
Okay.
will. We'll let them see what we're looking at here. This is the culmination, as Elizabeth said, of probably well over 20 years of work, not by me or Elizabeth, although we got involved in this starting in what, I don't know, 2008, 9. We started doing some studies of anthropology departments and how they decided to teach what they taught. But prior work had also been done by quite a few people, including Napa, including my friend Lori Price. And all of these folks were looking at how do we teach what we teach and how do we decide what to teach. Our conclusion, Elizabeth's and mine, after reviewing some of that and doing some of our own work, was that there really wasn't any plan in our discipline for preparing practitioners. There was a lot of stuff going on, but there wasn't an overall plan or what we came to call a framework for thinking about this. And so we began to pull from various places, including our own work and some of the recent, quick and dirty stuff that the commission's been doing with practitioners and with instructors. We started pulling some of what we thought were the common elements. And we wanted to present those to you today. When I say a framework, I don't mean that this is an imposed framework. This is the way we work, obviously, in the field. This is inductive. This comes out of, in other words, what's already happening. But not all of this is happening in the same way in every school, which is fine. Not all of these elements are in any one particular program. So we thought we'd put it together for you and show you what we came up with, and then maybe start talking about what we could use this for. I have some ideas of my own, and I know that Elizabeth does too. The diagram in the middle of this is sort of the structure of a typical anthropology program. And we're not intending to replace anything that's going on right now. This is more additive and in the way of an enhancement rather than a replacement. But most of our programs have a set of core courses. They then have sort of elective courses. They have cognate area courses, which might or might not be in our department. They might be in human geography. They might be in economics. They might be in history. Most programs offer some form of field experience. I'm talking about graduate programs here, obviously, but some undergraduate programs as well. Field and or work practical experience. And at almost every college and university, there are various types of extracurricular activities which one can engage in on campus. Conferences, opportunities to mentor or to advise, language learning, those sorts of things. So let's back up to the first one, and I'll show you how this goes. So if you look at this, these are not outlined in any particular order, nor are they in any particular priority. But if we start sort of at the top at 1 o'clock and start reading clockwise around it, one of the elements of the framework is practical experience. Another is some form of professional preparation. And I'm going to go into a little detail on each of these in just a minute. Some capstone course, which produces a tangible product. It might be a design, it might be a report, it might be a presentation. Many programs involve meeting with practitioners in various ways. They come in as visiting lecturers, they come in as occasional guest speakers, they come in as mentors and advisors. Many programs also help students build networks. The faculty introduce the students to their networks. The students are taught or trained in how to build a professional network, and they are encouraged to do that through attendance at, say, national conferences. One of the things that came up in our Delphi reports was that a lot of practitioners said we weren't really properly prepared to be able to communicate with non-academic, non-anthropological audiences. And so that's something that we think is very important. Some programs do this, most do not. One of the other things that we noticed was that although anthropologists are extremely good at thinking about social situations, and many programs train students to be very good critics of what's going on, very few programs actually teach our students to do anything besides research. In other words, they're very good at doing research and they're very good at critiquing what other people have done, but getting stuff done themselves. A lot of our practitioners reported to us they had to learn an awful lot, awfully quickly about things like budgeting, management, and so forth. Then, of course, there's the perennial issue of ethics. Ethics is very important to all of us, as we know, and the ethics of practice is something that we have been discussing for quite some time. But Elizabeth and I both think that the discipline would do very well to develop that quite a bit more. Methods, we all teach methods. Well, not all of us actually do, as Lori Price found out, but most of our programs do teach methods, but often the programs don't link the methods to their use in problem solving. In other words, once you've got your data, what do you do with it? Or what do people do with it? And then finally, and this is probably something that would come first if you were trying to sort of, arrange this in some kind of a sequence. We don't think programs do enough to explain the history of practice within anthropology. Most students don't realize that anthropology started as a very practice-oriented discipline. So that, in a nutshell, is what those elements are in the framework. Why don't we drop down, Elizabeth, to that slide? Yes, good. And so here, I've sort of kind of gone over this actually in the last few seconds, but these are the elements explained. We think that, a discussion of how practice developed will help students understand what they can do with it. We think that teaching people methods has to be linked to how the methods or how the data that are derived from methods are actually used to solve problems. We think that would be an enormous advantage for our students to sort of see that process through. The ethics is not so much that we think stuff that's going on now is wrong or anything like that, but rather that practitioners face a variety of ethical situations which are not necessarily discussed in many of our programs. Most of our ethics talk revolves around research ethics, and there are a whole bunch of other kinds of dilemmas that come up in the workplace. And we think students ought to be prepared to discuss those. And we think the information to do that will come largely from practitioners. Go ahead and do it. There we go. Planning and management of change. It turns out when you ask practitioners what they actually do, they all talk about how they use anthropology, but what they use it for is in many, many cases to promote change and development within organizations. This is a huge departure from traditional anthropology where people were actually told not to promote change, not to mess with things, that your job wasn't to actually do any of that. Your job was to be a seeing eye, a recorder. Today, practitioners are all expected to be able to quote unquote get things done. But we don't train people very well in how to do that. And so they face steep learning curves. And I think that in some cases it works out well and they survive that process. In others, I think they get frustrated. So we'd like to encourage programs to spend a little bit more time on that. The communication is obvious. Students need to be able not only to explain their discipline to people who may not have ever encountered an anthropologist before, to people who have strange ideas about anthropologists that derive from, say, Indiana Jones movies, or to skeptics. And one of the things we found out from our Delphi surveys was that a lot of people in the workplace don't really care whether you're an anthropologist or not. What they do care about is how you can help them do what they are all trying to do in the workplace. And so in addition to training students to explain anthropology to people, I think we also need to give students an understanding through literature study and discussion of some specific examples of how anthropology works in order to help people solve problems, because that is the kind of question they get asked during interviews. How can you help us? And a lot of our practitioner respondents said we weren't really very well prepared to do that. Then, of course, there's the practical experience side of things. I think this is well understood by most of us. We don't really need to go into it here, but internships, class projects, practicums, all of these things are very, very useful to students. Let's go to the last one, please. Professional skills is a catch-all term. Elizabeth and I looked at this and we've been talking to employers mostly who said, you know, we love these students that we get from anthropology. They're really good, but they're kind of clueless about how to operate in the workplace. There are some things about them that they just need to be told. And, you know, getting stuff in on time, doing things to standards, so forth and so on. It sounds easy. And it sounds almost trivial, but it's not. And so we think that some basic professional skills preparation would go a long way toward helping our students succeed in the workplace. I'm particularly interested in showing people how to resolve differences and conflicts and how to negotiate things, because so much of my work, at least, and the work of most of the people that I know, revolves around that. Product-oriented capstone courses, we think it's very useful for students to have a product at the end of their study. I think this goes as well for undergraduates as it does for graduate students, but something tangible that they can bring in to the workplace and say, look, this is what you can do with what I know how to do. Exposure to practice and practitioners, again, I think kind of a no-brainer. Most of us understand this, but very few of our programs bring in practitioners on a regular basis. In some of our programs, you can go through an entire undergraduate program and never see a practitioner. And that's putting those students at a huge disadvantage. So we think that some way ought to be found, especially today, given the communication technology that we have, including the stuff that we're using right now, Zoom and Skype. There is no reason why we can't be having conversations with practitioners on a weekly basis in some of our courses. And then finally, networking. Networking professionally is a little different than networking on social media. Elizabeth has given some workshops on this. I've attended a couple of hers. I think they're very good. I think we can all do a lot more to show students how to do this in a way which positions them for success. Those are the elements of the framework. Let's go to the last one and we'll just sort of wrap up here before we. So what we'd like to do is discuss this with you, whether there's something missing. Obviously, each one of these categories is very broad. It could be further elaborated, but we're really interested in, is there any big hole in this? Is there anything that we're absolutely missing? We don't see this as something that we need to get agreement within the discipline on, but we think it would be extremely useful for a number of things. Number one, it would be a good way to organize our discussions about things. So let's just take one example. Let's just take sort of practical experience. What does that mean? It means different things to different people. It means different things at different universities within different departments. That is just fine. There is no point in trying to sort of, as the Europeans might say, harmonize this, make it all look like the same thing. But there is a great deal of value in having a discussion within our discipline about different ways to do it and what so-and-so's experience has been compared and contrast with others. Think of it as ethnology, if you like. That's what it is. We're talking about ethnographic experience, trying to go out and do something and bringing it back and saying, so what did we all learn together from this? I think it will make our discipline much richer and it will make our own teaching abilities, I think, much more effective than they are right now. So that's one thing that we can do with it. Second thing we can do with a framework like this is we can organize materials under various categories. Oftentimes we give students a reading list and they're expected for them by themselves to figure out how it all goes together. But we can organize materials and produce materials which respond to various elements of this framework. And in so doing, it seems to me, provide resources for both students and teachers. So that's another thing that we can do with it. There are probably some other things, but I'd like to stop there. I think this is fairly clear. Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to put all this up on the website. Is that right?
Yes, I was going to ask Matt if he could put it up in the next day or so. And we will put up both the slides and the written report,
Yep.
which is about, I don't know, 3 pages, 4 pages long. It's short.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's pretty much what we've been working on. It didn't take as much time as I thought it would to develop this framework because we use a lot of other people's work and thinking, but we wanted to get it out and sort of have it be a living document for all of you to look at and pull at and shape the way you wanted to. So thank you.
Great. So I see a bunch of comments in the chat, and I'm wondering the best way to have this discussion. Would it be better if I got off the sharing portion here and so we could all see each other, or shall I leave the slide up? Can somebody just shout out and tell me what to do?
I kind of want to have it up as reference if other
Okay.
people
All
can.
right.
And you can always like pull the bar on your screen over so it's a little smaller.
Okay, sure. Let me do that.
Oh, like for people
what you
individually
mean?
in their views. Yeah,
I'm sorry. So, okay.
you're fine.
All right. Okay. I'm not as technically astute as you are, Jennifer. I wish I were.
We'll get you there.
Okay, little by little, huh? Kicking and screaming. Okay, so let's hear your thoughts on this. Ryle had a very specific question, which is what's missing, but you may also have some thoughts unrelated to that, and you want to talk about something else.
So this is,
Yes, please go ahead. Just say who you are.
yeah, so this is Nadine Mendicki. Can you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. So, hi, everybody. 15-second description, MA prepared, worked at the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals in marketing and market research for 35 years, now retired. One of the things that I have found that was helpful to me, because frankly, no one really cared that I was an anthropologist. I cared. Others was what can you do with what you know is what was important, is talking about translation of findings, right? So I didn't produce academic reports or reports that you all might, those who are, in the academy, but I might produce a 15 to 18 page report with a 2-page executive summary. And then they would come back and say, okay, can you take the whole thing and get it into a slide? Which is like cutting off my arm, right? Or, selling one of my kids. I mean, yes and no. And so I found a lot of the skill that I needed to do, Rao, was talking about translating my findings into something meaningful to people making decisions. In my case, frequently was hospital higher ups and leadership. What weren't we delivering to patients? What are families and patients complaining about? What are we hearing from social media in terms of pushback, if you will? When we share a result or we proudly promote something we've done, and then you look at the comments and they're sobering. And so is there some way we can take the word translate, and I'm happy to work with you, offline about this, in such a way that while it matters to me and to this group that we call ourselves anthropologists or applied social scientists, what really matters in the workplace, and remember, I didn't work in a for-profit company. I worked in 501c3 hospitals, although they were multi-billion-dollar enterprises. Was the importance of translating findings, what I call the so what. So
Yeah,
taking the data and information and saying, if there's only 3 things I can tell you before you leave this room, here are the 3 things you need to hear from patients and families. And after we get over our egos about how I spent weeks doing data and analysis to come up with 2 slides, is the how do we do that? So what our work is meaningful, ultimately, in this case, to patients and families, and making sure that we didn't forget.
okay, Nadine, I think that's a really good point. And I'm sure Ryle is totally open to working with you specifically on that point, and there may be others. I saw Suzanne was on the call, and I know she's done a lot of translational work as well. Are there other missing areas? And I admit I have not read through the chat, so feel free to bring something up.
Suzanne here. There's translation, but there's also implementation.
Okay.
And I'm looking at planning and management of change, but in between, and this is where everybody's depend, not just anthropology. It's where we drop the ball. Is it should be planning, implementing, and managing change.
Okay.
You need to actually do it.
So
You actually take actions to bring about change in a way that's consistent with your thinking, your theory, your planning, and management is to sustain it.
okay.
I agree.
So-
And if I could just sort of, heatedly agree with you, Suzanne, on that. I mean, I didn't put that in and it should go in. Implementation is a huge big deal. To the previous point about translation, I also agree completely. One of the things that I learned, since a lot of practitioners don't actually, only a few of us have ever actually been involved in policy making. Many of us get involved in policy critiques, which is not the same thing at all. And when you work with policy makers, you realize that they are almost the antithesis of the anthropologist. Anthropologists like to ramify stuff, and policymakers need to collapse things. And that's why you get asked, right? You need to boil that down to one slide or one side of a sheet of paper. Otherwise, we can't use it. So that experience is extremely valuable. And I've been making notes as both of you were talking about this. We'll try and put this in either creating a new category or ramifying the existing ones. But thank you so much for those comments. Yeah.
Okay, who else?
Hi, this is Susan. I just,
Hi.
I made a comment in chat. So sometimes it's so obvious it's overlooked, but we need to put something in here about theory, but it's specifically about applying theory to solve problems. So in our department, of course, we and it's often critiqued that practicing anthropologists don't use theory, right?
Oh, right. That's
Well,
Yeah.
That's the critique. But I think we use theory in a very particular way when applying it to understand our data to help us solve problems. And I think that's an important part of this framework. It's a particular kind of applying of theory and applying theory. And I think it's not about just hypothesizing and doing the airy-fairy stuff. It's about using your theory to help solve problems, and I think it's important to be in here.
I would agree. I read your comment. Thank you. Yeah. Theory does a lot of things for people. It helps you decide where to look, doesn't it? And
Yep.
it also helps you. So I mean, yes, absolutely right. And that should be put in. So thanks for that. Right. Yeah.
Thank you. Rob? I see your hand.
It's on mute.
He's on mute.
Can't hear you.
Unmute. Okay.
Yeah.
So sorry for my technological incompetence. So I'd like to take a somewhat stronger line about the role of theory in applied or professional anthropology. I think we set ourselves up to be the dummies in the room by essentially saying, well, we take the theory that scholars develop and then we use it. But I think that's about a very out of date from in terms of some of the philosophical underpinnings of the social science. So I think, for example, that many of the ways of getting knowledge that were standard in applied contexts 50, 60 years ago, I think are now called co-production of knowledge. And I'm not trying to say that is not the same thing as a conventional ethnographer informant role. But that stance, and I find in a number of other areas as well, things that I and my colleagues doing applied work, say with tribes in the 80s, has been discovered in an academic context in the last 10, 20, 15 years. So, and I'm not trying to go here as a discussion for today, but I think a lot of this has to do with envisioning really a pragmatic view of knowledge. I mean that in the philosophical sense, so that pursuing useful objectives, however useful is defined, is getting you to different types of knowledge. It's not merely that theory runs to application, runs to result.
It can go both ways. You're basically saying it goes both ways.
Yes.
Across and up
Sure.
and down and around.
Yeah. And if the world of people who are not primarily academic scholars, maybe scholars in other kinds, if we want to define ourselves as purely the passive recipients of insight from the academy, we can do that, but I don't think it does anybody any good.
Okay, I get that. Ryle, did you want to comment?
No, but those of you that have listened to me on my various rants over the years know that I feel exactly the same way. That I don't know, it was one of the French guys that appropriated the term a theory of practice, but I think that the kind of thing that Rob's talking about is something that struck me for a long time, which is that practitioners engage in field work and the discipline largely ignores what they do. And that impoverishes our discipline. And it does not help us build theory. And there's all sorts of room for theory about how things work out in the world. And we are ignoring most of it. So if that was part of what Rob meant by what he said, then I couldn't agree more. And I think that needs to be somehow in here. But that to me is a rather thorny problem. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be in here. I think it should. But if you or Susan Squires, who I know also feels, I think, kind of the same way about this, that practice and theory back and forth. If you have ways of conceptualizing that we can put into this framework in some way or other, please let me know, because I would love to do that. I think that's good. Yeah.
Sounds great. Mark?
Yeah, I'm glad to join this group and listen to all of you. One thing that I would like to add is something like self-inventory or reflection, and students figuring out what their values are, what their motivations are, what their interests are, and figuring out what kind of career they want to pursue. And I feel like that's an important part of figuring out where you want to go with your anthropology.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Susan, Andriata?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where to position this, but going back to Susan, Roberts, and Ryle's comments on theory, for me, theory informs data collection as well as analysis and application and implementation. So kind of the glue that's holding a lot. And in part, it may go above methods, but it's also could come after methods. But I think it, as Susan commented in the chat, it belongs as its own header. And then that way gives us the place to address it as we are right now in discussion. If you put it on the diagram itself, we can talk about the different facets and importance of theory, both its history and its application.
Great, thank
Okay,
you.
good, yep.
John?
Yeah, I'm not sure how this connects with the theory issue. Sometimes I feel like that some of the things I get involved in, I need somebody to interview me so they can actually tell me what I'm talking about. So a couple of examples that I would give is that as a practicing anthropologist, I facilitated a meeting back in 2018 that emerged into a collaborative in Louisiana that is looking at issues of both culture and issues related to climate change, migration, and we, over the course of the pandemic, started having online meetings that attracted attention from the governor, who then wanted our impact or our thoughts on policy related to climate change issues in Louisiana, right? And a lot of those folks that are involved in the meetings are community people that resulted from facilitations that happened between academics, communities, nonprofit stakeholders, and community members that all realized that it was important to work together to kind of create not only some momentum around the issues we cared about, but also have an impact on policy. So I have no idea where theory fits in on that, right? Another example I would give recently is that I was involved in the leadership team that helped restart the Poor People's Campaign back in 2018. And we developed some policy recommendations in 2018 that morphed into policy recommendations when the Biden administration came in. And 12 of the 15 recommendations at the federal level actually became a policy through the first federal pieces of legislation that impacted us during COVID, right? And that had everything to do with the fact that the policy recommendations we were making were solid, but we finally had the ear of Susan Rice, who actually was in conversation with Reverend Barber about actually pushing forward the policy recommendations that we had written up. So it was an organizing strategy connected to policy, but it was facilitated by a number of us that were anthropologists kind of in the mix. So we were in the middle of it.
Yeah. So a lot of what you're talking about seems to be focused on policy and how it gets done.
That's right.
So I think that's an interesting point. Ryle, any thoughts on that?
Well, it relates to something that Tracy put in the chat, which she hasn't said anything about, but I mean, I can just summarize it. She says, many of my students come to anthropology with a strong social justice element, often centered in environmental issues. They want to work, but are deeply invested in advocacy. So that's a big part of their career goals. What John is talking about hits on a number of the things that we have been discussing. It's implementation, it's policy, but it's also sort of getting things done strategy. And I think that would be extremely useful. I mean, I have trained what I call change agents for years, and it does involve making them understand that research is only a part, and sometimes a rather small part, of what goes into social change, and that at some point politics rears its head. I was about to say its ugly head, but it's not an ugly thing because it is a fact, and that is what happens. And you either are able to deal with that, the politics of a change effort, or you are not. And John, what you're describing, it seems to me, is a perfect example of that. That you can have a really good plan, but unless you get the right people on board and convince them to move it ahead, it may not go anyplace. So those are all issues that our students are going to have to deal with. How we get this into an anthropology program is another matter, but I think it's very important. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, well then, what I would recommend is we'll update this and be in touch with the people who either verbally said something or made a comment in the chat pertaining to the framework. And then I guess we'll have version 2 or a revised version. Does that sound like a good plan?
Well, that was sort of my plan with it, was to throw it out there, see what happened. And I treat this as a sort of a living document. I think at some point I've talked to Jennifer Studebaker about producing this in some form or other as a one-pager, right? That we can hand out to students and instructors. But it will change over time as our understanding of what we're actually talking about. I liked John's comment about how somebody needs to interview him to find out what he's thinking about. I mean, we need to interrogate ourselves at, continually to sort of figure out what is it we're really talking about here. And as we get a better and better handle on it, we'll be able to do two things. We'll be able to give names to things that right now, framework, for example, is not, to my mind, an ideal name for whatever this is. But the name will come to us at some point. And so will ways to sort of describe these various boxes. There will be maybe a few more boxes. Maybe the boxes will have different things in them. But at some point, we'll settle down with something that looks pretty good to us. And that will then be something that we can use going forward. But as I said at the beginning, it is by no means a prescription for departments. You do as much or as little of this as you want to. But if you're curious about what the experience of our own students has been out in the field, this is what they are telling us would be useful to them. So you take that and do as much of it as you want. Thank you very much for a great discussion. I made 2 pages of notes and I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of you.
Super. So, and offline, anyone can send Ryle comments. That would be, I'm sure he would appreciate it. Just a couple of other updates. The first is that some time ago at one of these meetings, we mentioned that the commission would be able to offer some thoughts to existing anthropology programs about integrating aspects of practice into their curriculum. And it turns out we've had a great meeting with the University of Delaware. So thank you, Carla and her her colleague Jen. We met with them just a short time ago and reacted to a proposal that they have worked on. And now we gave them some thoughts, things to think about, and now they're going to see to what extent they're able to integrate some of what we presented today and do it in such a way so that it is done over time. Everything is not going to get done tomorrow and change the Delaware program, but instead, it's going to be up to them based on the context in which they live and work and the people that they have access to in their areas of expertise, what they can and can't do. But at least now they are going to be using the early version of the document that we presented today. If there are others of you out there that would like some thoughts from us about the work that you're doing, we would be more than happy to provide that. And then just a few other quick points. Some of you may know that we have an executive session at the AAA meetings. We were pretty pleased to get that. It'll be on a Thursday of the meetings in Seattle, which are scheduled for November 9th through November 13th. And it will go over what the commission has been doing since it started. So basically, we will have been at it about 18 months at that point, and I think we have quite a bit to show. But it's also to get insights from the people in the audience about where they think we should be going next. So if any of you are planning to be in Seattle, we hope to see you with your coffee cup at 8 a.m. On that Thursday. Second point is I was contacted by Jennifer Collier, who is at EPIC. EPIC stands for the Ethnographic Practice in Industry Conference, but now it just goes by EPIC. They are hiring, and they're interested in someone who would be able to do communications and manage their platform for them. So she asked me to make that announcement. If any of you are interested, or if you know of people who might be interested, I actually have the job description. Just send me an email or put it in the chat and I will send it to you. And the last update is that Mike Hoffman, who's also a member of the commission and a high school teacher, is looking for someone to come into his class virtually who knows something about youth participatory action research. He called it YPAR. I had to look up the acronym. I was not familiar with it. So it shows how much I'm engaged with that concept. But at any rate, is there anyone on this call who knows about that and or who might know of someone else who could help Mike out? He's got his high school students doing some work in the community, doing field work.
Got like a whole new vibe and spirit about him, and he's like ready to take on the world and see new things and see new places and meet new people, even if I never see him again, which I plan on seeing him again.
Could you speak up, because I can't really hear you? Oops. Maybe that person wasn't speaking to me. At any rate, if anybody knows anyone who has this expertise, please contact me, or if you know Mike, you can contact him directly. So I think that's about all we've got for you today. Our next meeting will be in mid-December. And we look forward to seeing you then. You can also look for our next newsletter, which will come out in about 3.5 weeks. And we'll update you on where we're at in our thinking with the framework and all the other things that are going on. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening.
Elizabeth, will this
Yes.
recording be available?
Yes, we're going to post it on the website.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth, before you go, we need to capture the chat as well. There was some really good suggestions in that chat.
Okay, will do.
Yep.
All right. Good night, everyone. Have a good one.
Good.
Right.
Right. Okay. So there we are.
There's Barbara Olson.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah.
She's talking, but we're not hearing her.
Oh, you're on mute, pal.
You're still on mute.
No, Elizabeth, I had an idea for the name. You said you don't like framework?
Yeah, what do you want?
A capsule.
A what?
A capsule. It's like a capsule, you know, a pill that you take, and it has a lot of things that are going to make you healthy.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, this is like a capsule, and it's a capsule that's containing the ingredients for making anthropology healthy and, you know, living beyond our time for sure, as it goes into, you know, the universe and business. And I love the idea of a capstone class. You know, I used to tell my students to have a plan B, and their project was to create a business that they wanted to go into and brand it and market it and everything. It was all the bells and whistles. But the thing about anthropology is that when students come to something like this, you know, in a class where they hope to be given direction, they always have some kind of idea of a direction they want to go in, whether it's medical or government, and it would be great if in my school, that was SUNY Old Westbury, and I think Niall, are you at Adelphi? I don't know if he is, because that's really close to where I was.
He did a
but-
Delphi.
Oh,
He used
okay.
the Delphi research technique.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's what you were talking
Yeah,
about.
that's what he was talking about.
Okay. But if students could find out before they graduate the area where they want to apply their anthropology,
Right.
then their skills could kind of be honed in that direction.
Exactly.
That
Right.
was only my only contribution. Yeah,
No,
besides the
that's
capsule.
excellent. Thank
Yeah,
you so
that's-
much for attending.
Oh, Patty and we just went down to Essex Street and to see a gallery. And, she said, I'm going to be on this, viewing this commission with Elizabeth. I want to hear her talk. And I said, oh, send me the link. We got home just in time and
Oh,
she sent me
good.
the link and my wash was in the dryer. And I'm saying, I got to make this whole thing. But Elizabeth, I'm so happy to be part of you. This is great. I love talking to you and hearing
Oh,
these
super.
ideas. It's
Well,
wonderful.
That's great. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be in touch then.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so there we go. Yeah.
So I think you got pretty good comments. I mean, they were interesting.
They were very interesting comments, very insightful. Yeah, that's why I think if we could capture the chat and the video.
Yep.
Go back over it, and a couple of these things were quite helpful. I didn't hear anything at all that constituted pushback or
No.
Why are we doing this, or oh, we've already done that before. Nobody said that.